Thank you everyone for joining us for our September 22nd webinar, Open Source, Breaking Down Silos in the Legal Aid Community. Before we start, I just wanted to go into the structure for the next 30 minutes. This will be an open Q&A, and I will be functioning as the moderator. And near the end of the Q&A session, we can open up for more questions. So, let's see. Okay, so the subject matter for today's webinar is breaking down silos in the legal aid community. Despite the multiple obstacles that come with trying to meet the increasing needs of low-income communities, legal aid organizations have continued to be the leaders in many parts of the country for creating justice-oriented technology. Nonetheless, the existing environment for legal aid technology development, although impressive, is not yet as robust and efficient as it could be. Today, we discuss these issues with Abhijeet Chavan, the Chief Technology Officer of Urban Insight. Welcome, Chavan, if you'd like to say hi, and we can start.
Hi, this is Abhijeet Chavan.
So, Abhijeet, starting with our first question, what do you think legal aid's role has been in the creation and adoption of technologies to increase access to the legal system?
The legal aid world, as I have seen it, is very client focused. And I think that's a great starting point for innovation, is to figure out what it is that we really need and let the technology follow. And I think the legal aid community, as a legal tech community, has been working in that way and trying to figure out how to use technology to meet the needs of the clients. Maybe we can get into this a little bit later, but it's really a question of the variation that we see. There are legal aid programs or organizations that are leading the innovation, but there are others that are still behind. So that will remain a challenge, but it's the legal aid has a lot of work to do in terms of adoption of new technology improvements, especially in the past few years, and catch up to where the industry is in other areas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that leads me to my next question, which is, what barriers have been holding legal aid organizations back from being as innovative as they could be? And I think once you give your answer, we could probably shift over to Ed Marks or someone else who's been working in the legal aid field as well to expand on that.
Certainly. I think it's no surprise to most people in the legal aid community if I say that one of the biggest barriers is resources, both in budgets and in personnel and staff, to be able to do everything that you would like to do, and that remains part of the landscape here. But maybe a couple of other things that present challenges for legal tech is the speed at which technology is moving. By the time you can create a plan and execute a particular technology project in the right way, it may have moved on to the next level, and in many instances, new technology disrupts or displaces previous technology in that space, and which means you are scrambling always to keep up with what's happening. And maybe the third one is really the expertise that you need with in adopting new technologies. You have to understand them. You have to plan for them, make the right decisions, discover the best practices, and then execute that plan. And that is a challenge, because you have to do this while at the same time, fulfilling your main mission, which is providing legal aid and legal services. So that is a difficult challenge for many, I would imagine. And that's probably where we can see collaboration, where we can see building of more efficient tools by vendors and contractors, and by the tech industry, that might help in this area.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Ed, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Abhijeet, you hit the nail on the head for most of what I was thinking. I'm always telling people, we're damn good lawyers in legal aid, but not always good coders, programmers, interface designers, under the hood technology people. But we do know what we want the technology to do. We're very good at that. The barriers that get in our way, in addition to the resource and time issues, we often don't have access in our local communities, depending on what part of the country we're in. Unless we're in San Francisco or someplace like that, we don't often have local access affordably anyway to the technology expertise we need to build these things that we want the software and the other tech products to do. So that's why I'm excited about the Justice Hub platform. It gives us the chance to connect with and collaborate with and directly work with a wide range of people, no matter what the geography. Hopefully we'll overcome some of these problems, especially getting our staff more comfortable with the admittedly disruptive technologies that are coming fast and furious. Sometimes our staff especially feels overwhelmed by all the new things that are offered to them. We talk about it as the Ferrari in the garage. We've got this wonderful thing on our computers, but nobody's driving it because they don't even know where the ignition is. And we need to not only develop this stuff in powerful ways, but use Justice Hub as a way to get more of our staff familiar with what it does for their benefit, for the client's benefit, so they'll actually use it.
Excellent. Thank you, Ed. I also wanted to shift over to Miguel, if you wanted to follow up, because I know your A2J Fellows program is new, but it's very it works in this area. So I'm not sure if your microphone's on.
Yeah, my microphone's on. Yeah, thank you. So I think one of the barriers is, of course, running a fellowship program for law students. I think we need to train lawyers to think about how to solve some of these problems. A mother who has 2 kids and gets evicted, she's not looking for legal help. She's looking for a shelter and for a place to live. So we need to be working collaboratively with these social service organizations. So innovative collaborations, identifying partners that we can teach our current technologies that we do have, so they can help the clients or build different types of partnerships, and also, teach law students how to use, train, be comfortable with technology, with data analysis and visualization and design. And then lastly, I think, if we take an assessment of all the technology tools that we have, I just don't see very targeted implementation strategies for some of these technologies to reach these very underserved, I hate using that word underserved, but communities that just don't receive access. So improving upon that implementation strategy is, I think, another barrier that we're going to have to overcome.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Thank you for that, Miguel. Moving on to question 3. So, Abhijeet, do you think legal aid has been reactive in their approach as opposed to more strategic, which could produce lasting outcomes? Is there any way that we could remedy this?
I think it's a little of both. There is there are efforts by some legal aid programs, nonprofit organizations to explore the latest technology and try to innovate uh, in processes that use this technology. And by innovation here, it just does not mean just using the latest technology, because that is not enough. It really means looking at your business process and see how you can innovate there to get the most from the new technology, how to change your internal workflows, and how to change the way you are used to doing things so that you can achieve greater efficiencies with the new technology. So some programs, some organizations explore this. Others find it hard to keep up, and understandably so. There is a lot to do. If you do not have the resources, if you do not have the staff, and perhaps in-house technical staff, this becomes harder to do. It's hard to keep up with what's happening. And this is where it plays out in terms of the larger strategic question you asked. The legal aid community is a very collaborative community. We have meetings and conferences, and people share ideas. When we have innovation within one legal aid program, there is sharing of this this new thing that we have developed, or one program has developed, and trying to make it easier for others to use it. But because there is some variation in from one organization to the other, there is still a problem in implementing this. That it's not always completely easily replicable, and so that that presents a challenge. And this is where the strategic thinking has to come into play. I think we have to think together as a group. Several programs, several organizations have to think together as a group about where you want to go. And perhaps a few can develop those innovations, explore different ideas, try them out, and then pick the one that works, and then the community as a whole adopts that idea. This strategic thinking like this is approach like this is easier for one organization to do or one business to do. It presents a challenge for an entire community. But that is something I think we would need to build as a way, just like we do collaborate on other areas, to also do that in the field of technology, sharing, mentoring, coming up with common visions of where you want to go, and then adopting the solutions that have worked for one program versus the other, and then adopting them community-wide.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's see. I believe we have Jessica from Cali with us.
Yes, hi.
Hi, Jessica. I was wondering if you wanted to jump in on that and for question 3.
For how legal aid, can you just repeat question 3? Sorry.
We were discussing remedies for being more strategic as opposed to reactive in building technology.
Sure. So let me see, more reactive. So I think, well, I work with A to J Author. So those of you that don't know, I am the A to J Author program manager. And so we're in a period of transitioning now from the old version of our software, which was Flash-based, to the newer version, A2J6, which is mobile responsive, cloud-based, etc. And so what I'm seeing in legal aids organizations a lot is that there's two approaches. They've had these document assembly projects that are old. Some of them are like from 2005, a lot around 2008, 2009. And the law has changed or the forms have changed. And so we're seeing this as an opportunity for the legal aids to review their content again, to make sure that it's still valid. And we're also seeing kind of two approaches. The first approach is kind of, we don't really have time for this. We're just going to not slap it together, but we're just going to convert it, get it up there, and we don't really have a lot of time to spend on our content. And on the other hand, I'm seeing the legal aid organizations that are really approaching it and giving it as a chance to review, test again, and to really think about their content as a product that they want to market to the end users rather than just something else that goes up on their website. So I think there are both approaches that I'm seeing in legal aid.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jessica. So moving on to question 4, and I think it's really been somewhat answered in the last few questions. How can we cultivate a robust environment for legal aid technology development? So,
this is for me. This is Abhijeet.
Yes.
Okay. So what I have tried to do since I began working with legal services is approach this in a couple of different ways. One has been to create a set of tools, a package that you can use to set a baseline of best practices. And I've done this with, I think you may be familiar with Open Advocate, where we built the D-Law distribution. This is a Drupal distribution. Drupal is an open source content management system, and it's available for free for anyone to use. And you can build websites and very complicated web-based applications with this. But what is a challenge is figuring out the best practices and figuring out the right way to build it for this particular need. So what we did, thanks to funding from the Legal Services Corporation, LSC, is built a distribution of Drupal that sets those baselines, like what are the best practices and how would you implement them in Drupal and make that available as a package for others to use or to learn from. And this is open source, so anyone can get this. So this is the D-Law Drupal distribution. And that's available for those who can have the technical expertise in-house. They can download this, they can see the code, they can see how we have implemented the best practices for running a public information website for a legal aid organization. And either use it out of the box the way it is, or take it and modify it and use it for their own needs. So code sharing is one thing. And by code, it's not just the code, but actually the solutions you have built that are specific to the problem you're trying to solve here, which is, in this case, public information from legal aid websites, right? Public information websites. So code is one thing, and now we have this is on GitHub and certainly Tech and Justice and other programs, as they develop solutions, they're putting it up on GitHub so you can learn from it. This has been the culture in LSC for a long time, and the idea of being able to replicate a particular solution from one state to another, for example. And that's really the open source model, and GitHub makes that really easy to actually execute, to share your code, to let others learn from it and build on top of it. So that is one aspect of this. Driving this, though, is also the idea that I've tried to figure out is where the legal aid community is, and I've been doing these benchmarking studies, and this is available online. You can make it available at the link, but it really is tracking how the community is using technology and how things are changing. For example, how mobile traffic changed over the last 5 years, from being from nothing to really being more than half of the traffic for most legal aid websites. And how do you respond to that? So just knowing that this is happening, and that you have to do something about it is important. And I've been doing this benchmarking study for the last 4 years, how traffic is changing for different programs, what are the content management systems they're using over the last 4 years, how far ahead is the community in terms of adopting responsive design, and so on. So this report sort of is an attempt to understand where the community is in terms of what we think the best practices are, and then advocating for that change. The other aspect of this is the collaboration, and we started the first TIG hackathon in January earlier this year, and this was a hackathon that we held the day before the TIG conference, the main TIG conference, and it was meant to be a Drupal hackathon. So people suggested Drupal projects that they wanted to do, but actually it was far more successful than that. There were other programs and our participants that wanted to do things beyond Drupal too, and so we really had a wide range of projects, and we met. We actually started meeting earlier before the conference itself, virtually online, Slack, and planned things out. And then we had a great hackathon, and came up with some great projects and brainstorming that happened just the day before the conference. And so I think that this is one model, at least for the legal services community, legal services corporation, LSC community. I know Tech for Justice does hackathons too, and I have participated in some of them, and that's really the model of getting people together and to talk about solutions and write some code. But hackathons by themselves don't take you further along. They are a good start, and I think what we need to develop in the community is a way to continue that momentum that you get at the hackathon. You get that initial burst of speed right at the hackathon. You want to maintain that and keep moving, keep some projects moving. That's more challenging for any hackathon, and that's a challenge we will have to do. And then finally, I think that this is one area that as a community we haven't really done much with, is a sharing of data, and there within each organization there is a very good understanding of the data that flows through that legal aid organization and what it means, and anecdotally from what you know has been happening and you're talking to people, but also from the data itself over the last 10 years or 20 years, or however long you have the data for. You can actually track this and see. I've spoken to legal aid programs that are sitting on troves of data that they know, but there may be insights in there that could be shared. There are, of course, some privacy concerns, and there are other issues with anything that comes up with data sharing. But I think we will need to figure out ways in which we can also learn from what we know. Some of this happens in an unstructured way when two people meet at a conference and share how the previous year has been for them in terms of providing legal services in a certain area. But I think we need to think as a community beyond just those, one-off interactions, is develop a culture of data in the community, of data sharing and learning from this, and addressing those issues that come with it. So code, collaboration, and data.
Okay, thank you. I know we have a little bit of time left, so I'm going to get through my last two questions. Going off of what you just said, Abhijeet, I had a question about the open source model as it applies to legal aid. So the open source model, as we know, is a decentralized software development model that encourages open collaboration. A main principle of the software development is peer production with products such as source code, blueprints, and documentation freely available to the public. So the open source movement in software began as a response to the limitations of proprietary code. How can legal aid benefit from such a movement, and what are the advantages and disadvantages that you see?
Yeah, it's open source is a great model, and I think the community has adopted it in some ways. As the hackathon was showed, there's enough interest in sharing solutions that you've built and sharing the code itself. What happens in open source communities over time, though, is a structure develops for moving in the entire community in a direction that is beneficial, while at the same time maintaining the flexibility that you need in an open source model. In the open source model, you have many things happening at the same time. Unlike in a company, the company decides on a certain direction and everybody moves in that direction. In the open source world, people move in different directions because they're exploring, they're trying out different things. And you need to have that flexibility in the community. But as I spoke earlier, we also need to figure out some strategic directions that you want to move in. And for this to happen, open source projects, Linux, Drupal, WordPress, many of the Apache, many of these projects develop organization structures that try to preserve both these aspects of an open source movement, of the ability to maintain flexibility and foster collaboration, but at the same time set larger strategic directions. So I think that is a challenge for us to figure out how to do in our community of legal technology.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's see. I'd like to open up that question for anyone else in the audience, about basically asking what are the advantages and disadvantages to having an open source model in legal aid? Jeff?
Jeff, you're muted.
I'm not sure. Jeff, are you there?
He's there, but he's muted.
Okay, well, we can go forward. So my last question for you, Abhijeet, is actually part of a quote. So in Building the Justice Layer of the Internet, which was written by Jeff Oresti, Daniel Rainey, and Robert Page Wells.
Asking me that.
Hello? Okay, so going back to the quote, it basically states, justice systems have largely remained frozen in place, locked in particular geographic places in paper. Further, there is an immediate challenge for the profession to acknowledge not only that access to justice for the most vulnerable is restricted, but also that the capacity of traditional legal institutions is lacking. How can we break down these silos? And I feel as if this is another version of the previous question that I asked you, but I'd still like to hear what you think, Abhijeet.
Well, I speak to this from the technology side, since that's where I come from. It is easier in technology to break these silos. The open source model was one way to do it. And this open source places the solution and the user ahead of of other considerations, and it breaks down the silos, or it creates new areas by being flexible. This may be more harder in the justice system itself, since these the very nature of the justice system is so much variation from geographic location to geographic location, that this becomes a harder problem to solve, because you're not working in a universal landscape. You have to be able to convince a lot of different groups about the benefits of a particular approach or a particular solution. And the hope is that, at least in technology, if you see it working, if you see it being efficient, maybe if it's lower cost, it's makes work easier, then it should make its own case that, yes, let's adopt this approach. Let's be part of a larger community. Let's use solutions others have developed or adapt them for our own needs. And this may be easier on the technology side than on the justice system side. But my hope is that perhaps that will, also encourage the justice systems to innovate and share in the same way as is possible in the technology world.
Great
Christy,
answer. Yes, Jeff?
One of the things that Abhijeet said at the beginning is that the focus of our efforts have really been a client focus. And when focus from the justice system perspective, that's where the silos can break down. Because from the client side, if it's a domestic violence problem, if it's a tenant in a landlord situation problem, if it's a debtor in a workout payment problem, it doesn't matter which state you're from. Those problems are the same on the prevent side. If you take a preventive law approach, it's the justice system that creates different procedural barriers and obstacles for adoption. So the legal aid community making such a major effort over the years to really emphasize the client focus is the start, I think, to breaking down those justice system barriers. And certainly, given the time that we live in, where the efforts are being made by the states in many respects to connect the judges talking to each other and to look at technologies as a solution, the focus of the client side need is going to be, I think, the place to begin breaking down these barriers.
Thank you, Jeff. I think that's about all the time we have. Before I close out the webinar, Ed, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I just wanted to thank everybody for being interested in being part of this. If this works out the way we all know that it could, I think it'll be very powerful, so that every program, no matter how large or small, have an opportunity to contribute and benefit from what's going to be done through this platform.
Thank you, Ed. And just to tack on at the end, this webinar series is focused on the different ways that we can collaborate using justicehub.tools. Justicehub.tools is a growing collaborative space for legal aid lawyers, activists, advocates, concerned citizens, anyone who feels as if they can improve the justice system and create justice for their own communities. So we have a long road ahead of us, but we're excited to start this journey with all of you. Thank you.